Good morning, folks. In a minute, Jerry Cedar, also known as Rocky, will pull back the curtain for you and give you a little insight as to what really goes on behind the scenes in the big band rock and roll industry. You may not be aware of this, but Rocky has actually played with all of the big bands back in the 50s, 60s era.
Wait, not back in the 50s. It was later than that.
Later in the 50s. All right. I should have had him stand outside while I gave this intro for him. But I made the mistake of letting him read it before I came in here with him. But in actuality, there isn't one big name rock and roll band from that era that Rocky at one point didn't actually play the drums for or rub elbows with.
Elvis. Didn't play with Elvis.
Oh, he didn't play with Elvis? Okay, all right. But he does have Elvis on black velvet hung in on one of his rooms. Now, I've heard a number of the stories that you're about to hear. Some of them are going to actually absolutely make you laugh. Some will make you scratch your head. But they're all going to be memorable. Unfortunately, there's a few that you will not be able to hear because the people involved are still alive. But that's another story. Okay. There is a checkered past there. Rocky was born in Philadelphia, and the city that gave us Dick Clark and American Bandstand before they moved out to California. And back in the day, everyone who was anyone passed through Philadelphia, the city that was Rocky's hometown. He started playing drums when he was 10 years old. By the time he was 13, he was already making money playing drums with his grandfather's band. He was playing 1940s big band dance music. But he also, by the time he was 16, he was playing drums with a lot of the rock and roll bands that were coming to the Philadelphia and South Jersey circuit. And that's where he met Danny and the Juniors. And many of you probably remember that song, "Let's Go to the Hop, Oh Baby." I'd sing it, but I'm more of a writer, so you don't want to hear me sing that one.
I've heard him sing in church.
Yeah. But Rocky's powerful drumming absolutely impressed Danny and the Juniors, and they immediately invited him to step up and be their drummer. And for 10 years after that, he traveled with Danny and the Juniors and toured with them. And he met just about every big band that was on the circuit at that time. And over time, Danny and the Juniors actually invited Rocky to not only be their drummer, but to be their musical director, which was quite a big step up. But in the early 80s, Rocky split and created the band that we all know, which is Rocky and the Rollers. And you may not know, but Rocky still tours nationally and internationally. As a matter of fact, a week ago today, he was up in Connecticut at Mohegan Sun. He was the drummer and the band backing up, you may remember Bowser, right? How many of you remember Sha-Na-Na? Yeah. Well, he rubs elbows with Bowser, and Bowser is going to be on your cruise coming up, right? Yeah, so, with no further ado, I think people will say that. It's with pleasure that I introduce Jerry Rocky Cedar. Let's give him a hand, folks.
Thanks, Dave. Well, that was pretty much it. So thank you, everybody. Didn't expect that, and good morning. I didn't expect this many people. I've been on stage since I was 13, and I feel nervous. Not really. I try to be as humble as I can in my life, so when Dave asked me to do this, I had to think about it and pray about it and said, villagers have been very good to me. For 26 years now, we've been performing in the villages, and anything I can give back to you guys, I will definitely be there, without a doubt. I don't know where to start. I mean, he pretty much said how I got started in the business. It was funny, when I graduated from high school, so back in the 70s, I graduated from high school, and I was working in a band on the weekends, playing top 40 music. And I was living in Brigantine, New Jersey, which is just outside Atlantic City, working on the weekends, playing in a band. And I was working as a room service waiter, believe it or not, at Caesars in Atlantic City. So during the week, I was working, knocking on the doors and room service, Got to meet a lot of people. Milton Berle, I got to serve him dry rye toast and Poland spring water for breakfast. Anyway, I'm playing on the weekends there, and I'm going down the elevator in the back, and Chuck Berry was performing in Caesars that night. And I'm like, Chuck Berry, wow. I'm 18 years old, So anyway, I'm in the elevator with him, and he's got the security guy and all that stuff. He's going upstairs to do the show. And I said, wow, Chuck Berry. I said, you mind if I get an autograph? And he just went, no autographs. I went, I'm Italian, so I'll show you the easy, So anyway, about a month later, I'm playing in this top 40 band called Hot and Nasty. That was the name of the band. And we're playing at this place called the Velvet Lounge in Northeast Philadelphia. And in walks Danny and the Juniors to do a show that week on the Oldies Night. Now, by then, they were oldies acts. At the Hop was released in December of 1957 and went to number one in January of 1988 and stayed on the charts for 16 weeks at number one, something like that. So anyway, they said, hey, we're looking for a drummer. You want to audition? Long story short, I went and auditioned. I got the job. A month and a half later, we're playing the Lilac Festival in New York State, and I have to back the shows. So back then, the name of my band was called the T-Birds. And Danny and the Juniors, Joe Terry from Danny and the Juniors, God rest his soul, I love that man, he would get the band to back up all these shows because most of the acts that came out of the 50s and the 60s were singing groups. They weren't bands. So they needed bands to back them up. And that's how I got my start working with all these acts. And who's on the show that I got to back up that night?
Chuck Berry.
Chuck Berry. So I'm a kid, and I'm kind of on stage waiting. He comes up. And a funny story about Chuck, and I'll sidebar here a little bit, is he wanted to be paid in cash. Now, Chuck Berry didn't get a couple $1,000s back then. He got $25,000 to do a show. And it had to be in cash in a brown paper bag. This is a true story. I worked with him many times after that. And every time he showed up, he wouldn't come early. He wouldn't come for a rehearsal or sound check. Because if you don't know Chuck Berry music, you shouldn't be on stage with me. Wouldn't tell us what songs were coming up. We had to watch. He looked at me and he said, drummer, just watch my foot. And we're in. Not knowing what the song was. So he gets the brown bag, looks at the money, puts it in the trunk of his car, goes on stage and does the show. I'm like, what song's he doing? So we get done the show, we're backstage, and I walk up to him and I said, can I get a picture, Mr. Berry? He says, no pictures. I said, you probably don't remember this, but that's the same thing you said to me when I was at Caesars Resort in Atlantic City and you were going up the elevator. Of course, he said, I don't remember that. To this day, I've never gotten a picture with Chuck Berry. He wouldn't do it. He was a bit of a interesting fellow. But anyway, and he would have a certain guitar amp he would want on stage. And that guitar amp, there's only 2 or 3 of them left from the 1950s. And there was a guy that would carry that guitar amp from show to show. This is a true story. And if he didn't have it, he would go right to the promoter and say, you get the fine. The fine. If you didn't have that specific guitar amp, if it was a different guitar amp he had to use, he fined the promoter $2,000 in cash or he wouldn't go on stage. So I'm playing the Marie Chandler Pavilion in Houston, Texas with him again. And he was the second act on after the intermission. Johnny Rivers was on the show also. He closed the first half. Chuck comes out during the intermission, walks out on stage. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
I got a big mouth. He goes with a tape measure and measures the guitar amp and said, that ain't the amp, you get the fine. So that ought to tell you what kind of guy he was. Great music. That's about it. So anyway, I just started touring, and by the time I was 21 years old, I played Madison Square Garden, the Hollywood Bowl, the Brendan Byrne Arena, the Spectrum in Philadelphia. I'm playing all these shows, and I'm backing up all these shows, and for the next 10 years, that's what I did. I'm 20 years old, 21 years old. I'm playing at the Marina Hotel Casino in Vegas for 8 weeks with Dick Clark, Frankie Avalon, and Danny and the Juniors. And another group, you guys ain't old enough, called the Olympics. They had a song called My Baby Loves Western Movies. Remember that song? That was the show. So we got to hang with Dick we left there. We went to Reno for 4 weeks, performed there. And we started working for Dick Clark all the time. He would hire the band to back up all his shows. And that's pretty much what I did my whole life until about 1986, where I was doing these shows and I'm playing Madison Square Garden, I'm playing all these places, I'm backing up all these acts, and I'm looking at how much I'm getting at the end of the show. And I'm going, nah, this ain't working. So I started Rocky and the Rollers, 1986. And then from that point to today, it's been my band that we tour with all these acts under my terms and not theirs. So you want us, you pay for us. You don't want us, get another band. That's pretty much what I've been doing. Do I give autographs? I give a lot of them on checks to the ex-wives, you know. You know, so I mean, there's so many stories, and I'm here. I'm not trying to sell a book or anything. I don't have one, but I have been writing down a lot of these stories that I've throughout the years, and I've had a couple people approach me about being a ghostwriter and putting these things down on paper. There's still some folks alive yet that, you know, I just don't want to talk about those things, and I really don't want to talk about them after they're gone either, you know. Bill Medley, the Righteous Brothers, who I bring here to the Villages every year. He's the nicest man in the world. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's mega hits throughout the years. But there's a funny side about Bill. So I promote a lot of shows here in the Villages, if some of you people might have been to some of those shows. It's in his rider. Now, his rider is that thick. Certain this, certain that. He will not go on stage unless he sees a bologna sandwich in his dressing room before he goes on. Because when he gets done the show, he comes directly into the dressing room after the show and eats a bologna sandwich. I said, Maron, I'm Italian. I said, hey, you don't want a sausage and pepper sandwich? It's got to be bologna? So he said, not bologna sandwich. And to this day, he wants that bologna sandwich. It's in the rider. I got all this food backstage and all this wonderful stuff, and he don't want to touch it. He wants the bologna sandwich. Remarkable. 10 years with Danny and the Juniors. So Danny and the Juniors, we would fly a lot also. And they had the song At the Hop. They had the song Rock and Roll's Here to Stay. They had a lot of great records from the 50s. And we flew sometimes, but most of the time I traveled this country in a van. People think, oh, you got such a great, it's what you do. And I said, no, you don't know the half of this. They wouldn't fly. They would take the money. They had a van, and we would literally drive. We're based out of Philadelphia then. We would drive to, I'll give you an example of a show run we would do in the van. We would drive to northern Alabama, to the Northern Alabama State Fair. And that show was Del Shannon, Danny and the Juniors, Bo Diddley, the original Shirelles, okay, Doris, Mickey, Beverly, Shirley had been gone by then and out on her own. We drive there, do the show, sleep, get a shower, then drive to Detroit to play Pine Knob. 2 days to get there to do the show. From there, we go back to Philadelphia. That was a typical week for me for all those years, driving the country. So when I started Rocky and the Rollers, I kept driving because it's what I got used to doing it. And I got a big motorhome, and all the guys in the band were like, how come we're leaving at midnight and driving all night to go do a show? I said, well, that's what you do. Until, because we always used to take turns driving. Until, and I'm not going to name his name, and he's still with me in the band. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. We're going down West Virginia somewhere. We're leaving the show to go to another one. And he's driving. Now, mind you, this is a 36-foot motorhome with a 15-foot trailer in the back. And back then, you know, you could smoke cigarettes and drink coffee, Mountain Dew, by the bottles. I had bunks in there, and we're all sleeping. And all of a sudden, I rolled out of the bunk and hit the floor, and I look out, and he's got one hand on the steering wheel like this with a cigarette in his hand, and he's drinking coffee. And we're going down mountains. So I went, that's it. I'm done. I am not dying in this motorhome going to a show. I got rid of the motorhome, and I called all the promoters, Dick included, Dick Clark, and Wolfman Jack was another guy we did shows for all over the country. I said, you want us, you got to fly us. So now I'm a 2 million miler on Delta Airlines. Been flying a lot. Now there's about 250 acts I've toured with in my career. Everybody from Perry Como. I played drums for Perry Como. This was back in the early 80s. I'm in Denver, Colorado. And there's a thing called the Rocky Mountain Italian Golf Association. Yes, this exists. Well, we did this golf tournament every year that raised money for the Children's Hospital in Denver. So it's 250 Italians playing golf in bocce over 4 days. You go to the first tee, there's a yunky stand. You tee off, you go to the next hole, you play the hole, you go to the next tee, there's a sausage and pepper stand. You go to the next. So they bring in all these acts. Buddy Greco, you remember Buddy Greco? Perry Como, Frankie Ford. Not the Frankie Ford that did the song Sea Cruise, who we worked with a lot. He was part of a comedy act back in the 50s and early 60s called the Ford and Reynolds Comedy Act. They were hilarious. So all these acts, Frankie Avalon, Bobby Rydell, all these Italians would come and we'd do a show, and raise money, charge money for the tickets, and it'd be a dinner. So Al Carmesia, he's a judge in Denver. He's got a beautiful home there. He invites us all over, and I got to play with Perry Como. Now, the whole day before I'm playing in the tournament, I'm like, how am I going to do this? This is like my mother's favorite person. I didn't listen to much Perry Como, So we go to Al Carmesia's house, and we walk in, we go downstairs, and this is an Italian downstairs that has sausage and salamis hanging and cheese. There's wine everywhere. And I look over, and there's Perry Como with a glass of wine standing there. And I come down the stairs, and he just looks over. He says, you Jerry? I says, yeah. He says, come here. He gave me a big hug and gave me a glass of wine, talked to me for 2 hours. The next day was the show. I felt he had a way of making people feel so at ease, and he was generally a great human being. It was people ask me, who's the favorite guy you ever worked with or backed up? And I got to go to Perry Como. It was nerve-wracking. I'm like, you got to please catch a falling star. But there's so many. And then on the other spectrum, I was the drummer for the group The Grassroots for a couple of years, who had all those great records in the late 60s and early 70s. And I have trouble sometimes when I work with these acts, not the singing acts, because I'm not part of that group. But being a drummer in the Grassroots, per se, we flew to Puerto Rico to do a show, and there's an autograph session afterwards, and people are having me sign Grassroots albums. And I'm like, I didn't play on that album. I was 13 years old when that album came out, So I kind of refused to sign. And that kind of went into what I'm going to talk a little bit about now, and I hope you don't find this too disinteresting, but I feel that most people in the public need to know. There's a bill that I was involved with, and I testified in front of Congress, called Truth in Music. And it was passed in almost 40 states now, where if an act comes in and you're paying your $35 or now $55 or $65 to see a show and more, they need to have at least one of the original recording artists on that album. Or, as the law states, it needs to be a continuation of the original group. So you can't have these guys going out. There were some guys in New York, the Marshak brothers, and I'm not afraid to say their name, that were putting out the Drifters, Coasters, Platters, and Marvelettes. 3 of the biggest names, especially from the 50s. And none of them were original. And they would put out multiple acts. So there'd be 5 Drifters, 5 Coasters, 5 Platters, and none of them had original people in it. And they would just hire 4 people to learn the songs and do the dance steps, pay them a salary, and make all the money. And you're buying a ticket thinking you're going to see the Drifters, and you're not seeing the Drifters. There are no original Drifters left anymore. They're all gone. Charlie Thomas just passed a few years ago. He was my oldest daughter, Franny, godfather. Okay, he was one of the instrumental guys in this business getting me started. He's an original Drifter. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he's sitting home and can't work because these other groups are going out, undercutting him, and quite frankly, stealing his applause that he earned. So this bill was passed. We testified. I was doing a show in Grand Cayman, Platters, Drifters, Coasters. They flew us down. I'm expecting to see Charlie Thomas. I'm expecting to see Carl Gardner, the original founding member of the Coasters. And I'm expecting to see, at the time, Paul Robbie's Platters. Now, I'm in Grand Cayman. I'm stuck now. I got to do the show. This is a true story. The Coasters go up and do their songs, 4 guys. They come off the stage, and 2 of them change their color of their suit jackets and go back out as the Drifters with 2 other guys. Well, the show's going on, and I'm fuming. I'm playing the songs, and I'm looking at this huge audience. It's a big outdoor amphitheater, and I'm thinking to myself, this ain't right. So they bring them back to do an encore, the Drifters, and when they did, I walked off the stage. I said, I refuse to play any longer. Oh, what you mean, man? I said, you're not the Drifters. I said, 2 of you were just the Coasters. 35 minutes ago. Well, it started this whole thing. And then John Bauman, who was Bowser, what he was saying, John is one of my dearest and oldest friends. And I've been his drummer, musical director for 40 years. He started this thing called Truth in Music, which I just explained to you. And it took a while, but we went to Washington. We got Congress to pass the bill. We had a sponsor, and it got passed. So any acts that you see in Florida, because this is one of the states, that don't have an original recording member are a continuation of the original group. So what that means is if the Grassroots, Rob Grill, when I worked with him, Rob Grill was still alive, the original lead singer. If that group continues on after he died, that's okay, because that's a continuation of the original group. But if it's a Grassroots and 4 guys you ain't never saw before, don't buy the ticket. I'm pretty adamant about that. And I bring in a lot of groups here, and I try to vent all of them that I bring in, because I know them all, because I don't want to defraud you. You know, I don't want to take your ticket money as a promoter, and you're thinking you're seeing the Drifters, and it ain't the Drifters. I just wanted to throw that in there in my little part of political satire, if you say. But through the years, I mean, so many shows, so many acts. I mean, I could sit here and tell you the ones that drank a lot and did this and did that. I don't want to do that. You know, I'd rather put it in the book. Maybe. As far as Rock and Rollers, we've been playing in the Villages. This is 26 years this April. And I can't believe it. When we first started playing, thank you. When we first started playing here, there was 1 village. Wow, that got a laugh this time. It usually doesn't. No, there was more than 1 village. But there was only Spanish Springs and Katy Bells, and there used to be a big tent where the Lorena building is. And we used to do shows in there before the Savannah Center opened. They were just opening the Savannah Center at that time. I never thought in a million years that 26 years here at the Villages, doing 5, 6 shows a month here, that people would even still come to see us. Because, you know, we first started playing here. So back then, none of you guys were probably even here. You're still working. But the people that were there that retired were listening to Perry Como and Buddy Greco and, you know, the McGuire sisters. So we come in playing mostly 50s and very early 60s rock and roll. And there were people walking out of Katy Bells, I'm not kidding you, like this. That band. But the people that were 55 to 60 years old back then loved us. And we just started performing and performing. And I started bringing shows in the Savannah Center. The first show I ever brought in the Savannah Center 25 years ago, and the show sold out, 2 shows, was Rocky and the Rollers and Vito Picone and the Elegants. They had the song Little Star. There you are, little star. You guys are too young. That show sold out. If I was to bring him and Rocky and the Rollers today to the Savannah Center, we wouldn't sell hardly 200 tickets. You know, it's changed here. Rocky and the Rollers has tried to change. You know, when you come see us, we're not going to do a whole night of 50s and early 60s music. We're going to do some, but we've moved up into the 60s, into the Motown, the early 70s. We try to give everybody a little bit of those eras. And it's funny because when we start at 5 o'clock, which, by the way, I think is too early to start, but when we start 5 o'clock, especially in the summertime, most of the people that come to see us for that first set we do are the people that are older in the Villages. So I tend to do some 50s, mostly early 60s in that first set. Because by 6:30, because we play long sets in the Villages. We don't do, like most bands, 40 minutes and take a break. We'll do an hour and a half the first set. After that first set, they'll go home, and I can look in the audience, and it's like night and day. By 6:30 or 7 o'clock, the whole audience in the squares changes. It's a younger crowd that comes in. But that's what's going to happen. That's us?
That's us, we're young.
Really?
Yes, 25, young.
25.
25 young. America's forever young.
Forever young. Yeah. Aren't we all? There's been rumors going around, Rocky's retiring, he's sick. I'm not sick. I'm not retiring. I'd like to get to 70. I got a few more years till I'm 70. Then I might think about slowing down. But I don't want to stop playing. As long as you guys keep coming. I mean, I can't believe we still pack the squares. Yeah.
How did you find your way to the village?
That's a funny story. I was in Xenia, Ohio. I was doing a car show in Xenia, Ohio with Tommy Rowe. You know who Tommy Rowe is?
Yes.
Dizzy, Sweet Pea, Sheila. He had a lot of hit records. One of my dearest friends. Frankie Ford, the guy who did Sea Cruise, and Dickie Lee. You're not going to know that name. He had a song called Patches. He had a song called I Saw Linda Yesterday. He had a bunch, and he's a great staff writer in Nashville. He wrote the song Keeper of the Stars for Tracy Byrd and a bunch of other stuff in Nashville. Anyway, we're doing a show, and there was a DJ. His name's Larry Ryder from Ocala, Florida. Now, at the time, I was living in Florida. I moved to Florida in 1988. The band was still based out of Philadelphia. But I lived here because we were working a place in Kissimmee called Little Darling's Rock and Roll Palace all the time. So finally the band came down. So I'm living in Florida, and I never heard of the Villages. Never heard of it. I remember coming down 441 and seeing the Spanish Springs Bridge and going, what the heck is that? And you'd see the top of golf carts like going, because you can't see the whole golf cart. I'm like, it's a golf cart. I'm driving down to Orlando. Anyway, Larry Ryder said, there's this place called the Villages, and you guys would be perfect for that place. So I went, well, I booked the band. So I said, well, I'll take a ride down. And I had a cassette tape of the band and an 8x10 picture. And none of the guys in that band are here in this band now. And I gave it to, at the time, Barbara Gugino. Later on, Barbara Vesco. She's no longer here. I walked in the office at Spanish Springs and I said, hey, we're interested in playing here. And at the time, Katie Bell's had a house band called Katie Bar the Door Band. They played 6 nights a week. We played on the off night in Katie Bell's, and the people loved us. So she put us in the square. Next thing you know, I'm still here. I moved here. I lived here 9 years. Been living out in Yankeetown, Florida for the last 4 years. Not anymore. I mean, some of you might know, some of you might not. I lost my house in Hurricane Helene. So, because I live on the Gulf Coast, I'm literally living in a hotel room since September. It's fun.
Did you get to Church Street Station before it closed? Any comments?
We never played Church Street Station because they mostly had house bands that played there. And we played Little Darling's Rock and Roll Palace, which is in a place called Old Town in Kissimmee. And Little Darling's, Wolfman Jack had a lot to do with that. So we were one of the 2 house bands there. And that place would be a headlining act and a band like ours 7 days a week. So we would do dance sets, and then we would also back up the headlining act. So people like Fabian would come in there, Bobby Rydell, the Association, the Love and Spoonful, you name it, they played there, we played with them. This went on for years. And then they opened one up in New York. We were the house band at the Little Darlings in New York. We were the house band. We went to the Bahamas. They opened one up there. We played in the Bahamas with all these acts. And then it just closed down. It was just time. It was right around the same time as Church Street Station. Never played there, heard tons about it. Guys in my band were in the bands that played out there now, But that's gone. That's all gone now. It's not to be.
I sort of remember on one of the cruises you told a story about playing on cardboard box.
Yeah, so I grew up in Philadelphia, in the city. I didn't grow up in, a lot of people say, I'm from Philadelphia, and they're from Lancaster. It's not Philadelphia. Well, I wanted to start playing the drums. I come from a very humble Italian family. Didn't have a lot of money. So we lived in back of a restaurant, and I would go to the garbage and find the best boxes I possibly could. And I'd get 2 or 3 different size boxes, and this is a true story. And I would go take 2 wooden spoons from my grandmother's kitchen. And I would go downstairs. Up there we have downstairs, the basements, And I would literally play to Bill Black's combo. I don't know if you guys know who Bill Black's combo is. I would play those cardboard boxes with those wooden spoons to those records. And I taught myself to play. My grandfather, who's a renowned saxophonist, filled in with the Glenn Miller Orchestra at times. He had his own band. It was a little big band. And my drum teacher, he started paying for my drum lessons. Long story short, Buddy Ostapovich, great drummer. He bought me my first drum set, my grandfather, real cheapy little set, playing, taking lessons. He says, you know, you're getting pretty good. Why don't you play with me? So at the age 13, I started playing with my grandfather's band on the weekends, working moose lodges, dances, playing big band music mostly, which is what I grew up in because my grandparents raised me. So playing big band music, and that's it. I do incorporate that story and a cardboard box in the show sometimes. Yeah, I still play on a cardboard box. I'll do the song. You know the song Peggy Sue from Buddy Holly? So 20 years ago, I brought the original Crickets to the Savannah Center. So Joe B., Jerry Allison, they had Curtis playing guitar. And these are the guys that recorded all the records with Buddy Holly. So I asked Jerry, I said, Peggy Sue sounds, I said, that sounds like a cardboard box to me. It don't sound like a drum. He said, no, it's a drum. I said, well, I'm going to show you something. So I did the song Peggy Sue with a pair of wooden spoons on a cardboard box backstage. And Jerry's like, that sounds just like what we recorded. So I kept it in the act. So I play a cardboard box with wooden spoons, and people like, I wish that's all I could play. Because if you ever saw my drum set, I'm getting too old to lug that around, I can tell you that.
Rocky, when you back up singers like Mary Lewis and Peter Newman, how does that work? They send you a set list and practice it and work it out?
Yes, so 35, 40 years ago they did that. So what's become with us, and the guys, even the new guys in the band now, because you have to read music to be in this band. So Peter Noonan, it's a funny story. Peter didn't have his name Herman's Hermits for years. Legally, he couldn't go out as Herman's Hermits. And he's Herman of Herman's Hermits. But the guys in England owned it. And Peter lives in Santa Barbara, California. So in the 80s and the 90s, we were his backup band. So we learned all those hits. We played for Peter Noonan. And in the meantime, he had a lawsuit going with the guys in England and won the lawsuit, which entitled him now to be Herman's Hermits starring Peter Noonan. So he put his own band together. And he asked, I said, Pete, I don't want to play Herman's Hermits music every week. I said, I love you, bro, but I just don't want to play all men every day for you every week. Now I'm kicking myself because he's still the workingest act in the business from the 60s. He does 150 shows a year. I've been bringing him here for 20 years now almost, and he sells out 2 shows every year. He's 77 years old. And when you look at him, he looks like he's that 17-year-old kid on the Ed Sullivan Show. You know, he's a great guy. He's a workaholic. And his wife, who's from Paris, France. He met her when, he was touring in France. And they live in Santa Barbara, California. I think that's why he's got to keep working. I've kind of kidded around with Peter. I said, why are you still doing all these shows, man? I got him going to a show. We do a show every year in Sandpoint, Idaho called Lost in the 50s. Been doing it for 40 years. And I'm the producer of that show, and we play on it. And he's coming back again with us in May. I'm like, what are you? And then, the next day, he's flying to, New York or something to do a show. I said, why do you do this schedule? He says, because I have to and I want to. I said, oh, that's the best of both worlds there, But we know all the act shows because we were the backup band for these acts for so many years that now I don't even read their charts. You can name, there's 250 acts I've toured with over my career, and I could play every one of their shows like it was yesterday. Honestly, a lot of the stuff we do in our sets, when you come see us here or at the Savannah Center or wherever we're doing shows, last night we were at Spruce Creek South for a show. Most of the stuff we're doing are the stuff I did with these acts for the last 47 years. I stole their shows. They don't mind because most of them ain't working anymore. You know, I stole like Vito Piccone and the Elegants. I always kid around on stage. I say, I've been married 3 times. I said, I'm tired of driving by those houses I used to live in, you know? That's a Vito Piccone joke, by the way. You would know that for sure. But, I mean, I try to be humble. It's hard for me to talk about this stuff because I've been lucky. You know, I thank God every day that I'm still able to do this. Trouble with my hands and all that kind of thing from drumming all these years. It's all I've ever done. Since I graduated high school, I've never done anything else in my life but this. It's 47 years. It's hard to believe. I thought I was going to play football in college. I had 5 schools looking at me, and I blew my knee out my senior year, and the scholarships went out the window, and I moved to Atlantic City. And 3 months later, I'm on the road with Danny. The first show I did was in New York City called La Maganette. It's a big fancy restaurant with Danny Jr.'s. I'm almost 19 years old, and I'm playing in Manhattan. And 2 weeks before, I'm carrying room service. It's amazing. You know, God is good. I'm a praying man, so he's been very good to me my whole life. There's been ups and downs, but for the most part, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I really wouldn't.
You know all the songs, but what about the other guys in the band, the newer guys in the band?
So, you know, it's interesting you say that because there's a lot of songs we don't do anymore in the shows because we're learning newer stuff from 1969 or 1971. We're learning newer songs. So, you know, I got a new guitar player. Bruce Wallace, who was in the band for a long time, he got a new kidney. He can't play anymore. So we got this guy, Kenny. He had to move back to Dallas. So now we got this kid, Aaron, who's got a master's degree in classical guitar. And I heard the kid play, and I'm like, wow, this kid could play, and he can read anything. But he's 38 years old. How far is he going to go with Rocky and the Rollers? He knows everything. And he loves this music. So having a guy, see, most of us in Rocky and Rollers, we're all in our 67, 68, 70 years old. So to get a kid 38 years old in a band, it's like very refreshing, and he's really finding his way now. You know, he plays everything. And I said, hey, we're going to do Rock Around the Clock. I said, you know the guitar solo? He says, I'll learn it. I said, yeah, good luck. He played it note for note. I'm like, thank you. You know, and that's another fun, like, I guess it was, I brought the original Comets to the Savannah Center. So this was, well, 1954 was the release of Rock Around the Clock. It was the 50-year reunion, so I bring them in. All the original members that were on that record and played with Bill Haley, the original Comets, got back together to tour, 50-year anniversary. And I brought them here to the Villages. The first time I worked with them was at the Mohegan Sun Arena, and Bowser had booked them. So I'm the musical director for that show also, and we're on stage, and John says to me, they're on their way over for sound check. And we're standing on the stage, and I'm like, okay. He said, but they're all like in their 70s. And this was, 20 years ago, whatever. Yeah. I'm like, that'll be all right, John. So they couldn't come down the escalator and walk through. They had to bring them in the limo to the back of the stage inside the arena. So the limo pulls in, and I'm not kidding you. This is what they look like getting out of the limo.
At 70?
70-somethings. 77, 70. So Bowser's on stage. He goes, oh, my God. What did I do? So the stage is this high, so they got to come up. It's a big arena. So they got to come up the stairs. And so Dick Richards, the drummer, I became lifelong friends with until he passed away a few years back. He can't get up on the drum riser. So I'm literally got him like this. I said, whatever you need, man, you're a legend, rock around the clock, you're the drummer. I sit down, he says, I'll be all right. These guys get on stage, they're going to do sound check. And I'm standing there with John and a bunch of other people that were on the show. All the acts, it's a multi-act show, God bless you. It's a multi-act show. Lloyd Price was on the show. I could go on about the acts. Anyway, they sound checked Shake, Rattle, and Roll. Their version, not the Big Joe Turner version. Ba-down, down, da-da-da-down, ba-down, down, da-da-da-down. I'm like, and I'm standing on stage in the middle of this, and I'm going, you hear this, right? To John Bowser. He says, yes. They tore the place down. They did their biggest hit records were See You Later, Alligator, Rock Around the Clock, Shake, Rattle, and Roll, Crazy Cave, 5 or 6 songs. Every song was a standing ovation. Because these are the guys that started rock and roll, really. So I said, I got to bring them to the Villages. Villagers got to see this act. I brought them here, every song, standing ovation. Standing ovation. They're all gone now. That's the other thing with me being younger when I started with these guys. So, when I started with them, they were in their mid-30s, early to mid-30s, maybe early 40s. So I got my whole career becoming friends with these people. Bobby Rydell, there's so many. They're gone. And it's been hard for me as their friend, not only their friend, but the person that has worked with them all these years, to see these guys just pass every year. There's 2 or 3 or 4 of these guys that I've worked with my whole career. They're gone. I don't go to the funerals anymore. I was for a long time. I just can't do it. And no, I don't want to talk anymore about that. It gets me a little upset, but you know where I'm coming from. It's hard. I remember there were so many good times. I've been so blessed in my life to be able to say I've done this my entire life. I've never done anything else. Prior to this, I worked as a room service waiter. I worked on the back of a trash truck when I was 15 for $20 a day in the summer to buy my first car. It was a '69 Chevy Impala Super Sport. I'll never forget it. Now, all my family are Italian longshoremen in Philly. They work on the docks. That's where I thought I was headed. Because my cousins, my uncles, everybody worked on, unloading ships. And I was so blessed to be able to have the break that Danny and the Juniors get. I remember when they walked in, Billy Carlucci with Danny and the Juniors had a group called Billy and the Essentials. Also before the junior, or right after the Juniors. And he's got remember Al Alberts? Anybody remember who Al Alberts is? The hair, the black hair, the sideburns like Elvis, And, I got hair down here and a hoop earring. I'm playing rock and roll. And he's sitting at the bar in the club, and we're doing sound check, and they're getting ready to come up. And I looked at the other guys and I said, who the hell's the Elvis guy over here? Not knowing that a year later he became one of my best friends and was my first best man. Bowser was my last best man. John is my dearest friend in the world. I'm not going to tell this story, but I got married on a cruise ship. And because we do a lot of cruises. And I said, John, I want you to be my best man. He said, absolutely. We've known each other since the Shot on That television show where I first met him. So at the end of the ceremony, he goes, it's done, right? Little did I know, it was. So I learned from that. Don't have Bowser as your best man. And don't get married on a cruise ship, yeah, but there's so many the stories. I could sit here for hours and do this. That's why I'm considering, and I've been asked many times to write a book of all the stories. And I've started writing, I guess people call it memoirs. I don't call it that. I call it chicken scratch. But to try to remember all the different stories. Carl Gardner from the Coasters. He's the original founding member of the Coasters in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Remember Yakety Yak, Charlie Brown, all those great records. We're on a bus going to the Maine State Fair. We flew up from New Jersey. We did a show at the New Jersey State Fair the day before. We're flying up the day of the show to Portland, Maine to do the Maine State Fair. He's in the back. Now, Carl, and God rest his soul, I love the man to death, but he always had a pint right here. And we're driving about an hour and a half up to where he starts talking about this story. He's from Texas. The Coasters were all originally Texas and California. And he said, I walked to school every day when I was a youngin'. And he said, there'd be this snake on that path when I walked to school. It was called a whistling snake. So we're all on the bus going, oh, here he goes. He said, every day I walked to school and that snake would follow me to school and go, I said, oh, great. Until one day I turned around and whistled back. And that snake, I never saw him again. Yakety yak, don't talk back. I mean, it's just crazy, crazy. Bobby Rydell, oh boy. He was a dear, dear friend. We did a lot of shows together, and Bobby liked to go drink scotch after the show. And I was sitting right next to him until he had to get a new. And he did, and he kept drinking. And that's what eventually killed him again. You know, so those are things I don't like to talk about, but I feel sometimes I need to kind of vent because I wanted to slap him across the, you know. But these are things that, you know, the public doesn't know who these folks are. And you got to remember that, you know, in today's day and age, it's completely different. Back then, yeah, they were stars, but they didn't make any money. None.
Right.
And we've talked about this a ton with a lot of the acts. The managers and the record companies stole everything. They didn't see a dime. They were doing these tours, hundreds of thousands of dollars are passing through their hands, and they're getting paid $100 a show. Because back then, when you signed a record deal, you were basically signing your life away to the record company and or your manager. They were taking all the money. You weren't seeing any of it. Peggy March, you know who Peggy March is? Is that a song, I'll Follow Him? She was like 13, 14 years old. So she was a ward. Her parents had a sign and trusted the manager. The manager stole everything. She didn't get a dime. Nothing. You know, and you think these folks are, except if you're Frankie Avalon and you go on QVC and make millions, you know.
Beach party pictures.
Yeah. Well, they didn't get paid much for those either. I remember Fabian's a friend too. He's from Philly, and he would tell the stories about the movies he did. John Wayne and Stuart Granger and all those movies. He didn't get paid much money. It was all to promote Fabian and his records. Now, Fabian was a heartthrob, as we all know, but his records, he can't sing. I'm a man, you know. But because of his looks, it made him hugely popular back then, and still to today, he's. I don't think he's doing the Golden Boys thing much anymore. So Bobby Rydell, Frankie Avalon, and Fabian got together with Dick Clark, and it was called the Golden Boys A Bandstand Tour, and they were touring for years, and it was a great show. But you know, Bobby's gone. Fabian really doesn't want to work anymore. He's 84 now. Fabian was living in South Philadelphia back in the 50s, and they couldn't figure out how to feed themselves. Italian mother and father from Italy, couldn't figure out how to feed themselves. And one day, a guy was driving to American Bandstand, a manager, and saw him on the side of the road and stopped and got out and said, I'm going to make you a star. That's how it happened for him. They literally took him in and greased his hair back a little bit and gave him a song. And once that picture came out, and what was the thing back, Teen Beat or all those magazines, you know, he became a superstar. Unbelievable. A lot of it stemmed out of Philadelphia, you know, and Cleveland, and New York. Those were the main things back then, from the stories I've heard, you know. But anyway, I don't want to take up all your time. I'm very humbled to be asked to be here. Thank you for coming, and if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. You know, if there's anything.
Harry Como have an Italian name?
Yes.
What, do you know what it was?
Yes, but I can't remember. Because I didn't take my ginkgo biloba this morning.
He was a true Italian.
True Italian. Parents from Italy. Parents from Italy. Yeah. Yeah, his parents were from Italy. Yeah. Yeah.
Any comments on, what is it, the Blues Brothers, Rawhide singing?
Singing?
Not singing, it's just sort of
Oh, in the movie, you mean?
Rawhide.
Listen, when that movie came out, I saw it like 10 times. I saw that movie like 10 times, and one of the biggest reasons was not so much the Blues Brothers. I mean, John Belushi sang okay, and Dan Aykroyd was funny, but that band that they had, Steve Cropper on guitar, Steve Cropper and Donald Duck Dunn on bass were all the guys that recorded all the Stax records. Steve Cropper wrote Soul Man for Sam and Dave, and that's another thing. Sam and Dave just passed away a few weeks ago. Really, the biggest soul singer there was Sam and Dave. Sam Moore, dear friend, worked with him on many shows. Soul Man, I mean, he had so many great records. He just passed away. He was 89, I think, soon to be 90. So, yeah.
Does Al perform with you, Ron?
No, so, I was going to talk about that just for briefly, but Al Morse sang with Carl Gardner's Coasters for 12 years. He was a starlighter with Joey D back in the 70s for years and years and years. He sang with us for 16 years, 17 years, and he got bone cancer. He had prostate cancer a long time ago, and he beat it. Well, it came back, and it got into his bones. He has to use a walker now. He's in a lot of pain, not doing well. We just played the Ruth Eckerd Hall in December, and he said, "Can I come?" I said, "Can you come to the show?" Seriously? Yes. And for me to see him, I hadn't seen him in a while, I just busted out crying. I'm getting emotional now thinking about it because he's such a good human being and such a great entertainer. And to see him just barely walking because the cancer in his bones is taking it over. I praise God that he's still here. I don't know how much longer, but those of you that seen Al Morse with us when he was in the group, there's no one better.
Can you tell us the logistics of flying with all your equipment?
Yes, it's called a rider in the contract. Really. So we have a rider that goes with the contract, and it specifies the equipment we need to do a show. The set of drums I want to play, the bass amp, the guitar amp, the keyboards, and there's backline companies all over the country that supply that rider. So you get your equipment that you need.
You don't take your own.
No. No, especially now on a plane. Are you kidding? I mean, I show up with my drum set and the porter's running. And
I see that you're playing at Sumter Landing on Wednesday. When is your next cruise?
the next cruise is a week and a half from now. We leave on the 7th of February out of Port Canaveral. The next cruise, I used to do 3 or 4 of these cruises a year. I don't anymore. I only do 1 a year now. They're trying to get me to do 2, but it's a lot of work. We really play every day, Rocking the Rollers on a cruise. So we're doing Rocking the Roller stuff, and we're backing all the acts. So this cruise we're leaving on the 7th has Bowser. It'll be his official last show. He's retiring now. Bowser's 77 years old, guys. You know, he's retiring. Johnny Contardo from Sean and I'll be on it. Jay Siegel and the Tokens. Lala Brooks, the lead singer of the Crystals. Peggy March. Brian Hyland. Dennis Stefano, the original lead singer of the Buckinghams. Chris Montez. Vito Piccone and the Elegants. Peter Rivera, the original lead singer of Rare Earth from the 70s. You know, the first kind of white Motown act. They were the first white act signed to Motown, and they had a lot of great records in the late 69 to like 72. He's on it, Rocking the Rollers. You know, so the next cruise will be 2026, mid-February. This year we're going back on Adventure of the Seas. Next year we're going to be going out of Miami on Independence of the Seas, was the ship I got married on. That's going to be fun. But we decided to kind of change the port, and, you know, AAA books the cruises. You have to book through them, and we'll have the buses going down and all that. But we get people from all over the world on that cruise. People used to come from Australia, Germany, Ireland, all over the place to come on it. And it's a whole week of Rocking the Rollers dances and shows and question and answer sessions with all the acts. You want to hear some stories, Maron. That's some good ones.
You ever thought about doing your Italian tour again?
I am, September. I have a lot of family still in Italy, and I go back every year to visit them, and I started doing food and wine trips to Italy a few years back. In fact, Margaret's been on one, and then going again. So I take you to a lot of the places that you want to see, but I take you to a lot of the places you never heard of in Italy. This particular trip, I have a lot of friends in Tuscany that own wineries, so we go to the wineries that are off the beaten path. And we have food, we have wine, you get wine tastings. This trip is going to be, again, northern Italy. We fly into Rome. We'll spend 2 days in Rome just to get you acclimated, because it's a long trip and the time difference can whack people out a little bit. And then we'll go up to Florence. We'll base out of there for 4 or 5 days. I'll take you to Cinque Terre, which is the northern coast. Cinque Terre, that's five towns in Italian. It's right on the coast. It's beautiful. We'll stop in Pisa. Pisa, once you go there and go, hold the tower up, and take the picture, there's nothing there. But this trip is going to be a lot of off the beaten path stuff. We're going to go to Assisi, visit St. Francis. We're going to go to Umbria because the food, Umbria is the best kept secret in Italy for food. Nobody goes there. Umbria, it's a region in Italy. And then in Florence, we'll go to Siena, we'll go to San Gimignano. We'll do some things in Florence. I got a couple places in Florence I like to take people because I'm friends with the owners. And, so that's September. I'm not trying to hawk this because it's you got to go to AAA Travel to sign up. Now, I only take 30 people. That's it. They try to get me to take 40 or 50, and I'm like, no. That's way too many because it's me and you, and I'm with you every day. So I can't. 30 people, we're at 20 right now signed up. So that's 5 more couples and we're done. No, I don't want it to be a music trip. It's more about the food and the wine in Italy and seeing Italy. And I was doing them in California for a while, wine trips to California. You were on that one too. You're a wino, you know that? She don't drink at all.
Laugh at me, I have to tell you, make you laugh.
Oh,
You used to
come
laugh
on
at
up,
me.
Margaret.
I am.
This is Margaret, everybody.
Hi, everybody. I have to tell you, you're with him, it's like you're royalty. People in California, in Italy, any place we went, it is just really amazing. It is so special. You just feel special. He takes care of you totally. I speak truly from my
Thank
heart.
you,
I'm
Margaret.
Italian also, but it's a wonderful trip. If you want to go to
Thank you,
Italy with
Margaret.
him, it's really
Thank
good.
you, Margaret.
I'm sitting down now, Ron. I'm
No.
a good advertisement for you.
Yeah, you are. And she don't drink. All this beautiful wine we get, and she's like, I don't want it. I'm like, okay. I used to have a 350 bottle wine collection in my house. I'm kind of a frustrated wine and foodie guy, And now I don't have that anymore. I lost my house twice in 13 months. Hurricane Idalia wiped it out, got it fixed, moved back in. Hurricane Helene wiped it out. They start sheetrock tomorrow. And then it's getting sold. That's it. I'm moving. I don't think I'll move back into the villages. I lived here 9 years. And God bless you guys. I love yous. I do. But I can't live here. Because I can't. When I was married, I lived in LaBelle South. And when I'd be on the road, my ex-wife would be in the garage, and people would just pull up in golf carts and go, is this where Rocky lives? So I didn't mind it. Didn't work well for her. But, I love it here. I'm living here now. I've been living here since September. You know where I'm living? I'm not afraid to tell you. Town Place Suites, the Marriott Town Place Suites in Spanish Springs. That's all I can do. I'm not going to rent a house right now. All my stuff's in storage that I saved. And the house has to be rebuilt. It's another 2 months. And then I'm selling it and moving somewhere around here.
We've been to a couple of your, Cook, the Kate
Oh, those. I miss those. No, the La Festa de Rocky. So I would do these. Any of you guys went to my food dinners I used to do with Katie Bells? Well, there's no more Katie Bells, so I'd love to do it again. I would do 7-course Italian meals, authentic, like my family's recipes. My cousin came over from Italy and helped me cook one time. So, but cooking for 300 people, that's not, making tiramisu for 300 people was not easy. Homemade. So I'm dipping the ladyfingers in the espresso. I dipped 1,000 ladyfingers to make that tiramisu. My fingertips were black when I was done, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm not going to call Cisco and bring in tiramisu. Yeah, you get a different wine. I'd explain to you what you're tasting with that wine. It was a wine pairing, I love that stuff, but No more. Yeah, I got it. Thanks, guys. They're good. They're already, because they got another speaker coming in, so thank you. God bless you. I love you. Thank you.